Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7.
It's great to be here.
Today we are not wasting any time. We are going straight for the jugular. We are tackling the single biggest hurdle standing between belief in God and atheism. We're talking about the problem of pain.
It's the ultimate deal breaker, isn't it? If a God exists, and if that God is supposedly all-powerful and all good, then why do innocent people suffer?
Exactly. It's the question that just stops people cold. Why is there child cancer? Why is there mass starvation? Why do earthquakes hit impoverished nations? If God is there, why doesn't he do something?
It's not just a philosophical puzzle, it's an emotional barricade. I mean, for many people, the sheer amount of suffering in the world is the strongest evidence that the heavens are, well, empty.
So we're doing a deep dive into the one source that dares to look this problem right in the eye. We're analyzing the Book of Job.
Which is, you could argue, the most misunderstood and maybe the most complex book in the entire Bible.
I think most people have this, Sunday school cartoon version in their head. A guy loses his stuff, he gets sad, his friends are mean, and then he gets his stuff back. But the research you've pulled, wow, it paints a much wilder picture. We're talking about a cosmic wager, some truly awful advice from friends, and a surprise ending that involves a fire-breathing sea dragon.
It's basically a courtroom drama set inside a disaster movie, and it just refuses to give you easy answers.
Before we jump into the ash heap, and we mean that literally, I have a quick favor to ask. If you like my channel, please subscribe and press the like button. It really helps us keep these deep dives coming.
So, shall we set the stage?
Let's do it. We start with Job. And the source material makes it so clear this guy isn't just, doing okay.
No, he is winning at life in every single measurable way.
The stats are just ridiculous. 500 oxen, 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, plus a huge happy family. He's the wealthiest man around.
But the text is really careful to emphasize that he wasn't just rich, he was pious, incredibly devout.
Yeah, there's this detail in the notes that I found intense. He would offer sacrifices for his 10 kids, just in case they even thought something bad about God.
He's hedging his bets.
It's like a spiritual insurance policy.
It shows he's a man of integrity, but also meticulous ritual. He knows God sees his heart, not just his actions. But as our source points out, Job didn't realize that someone else was watching him too.
The scene shifts. We're in heaven. The sons of God are presenting themselves. And this is where we meet the villain of the story. But let's unpack this because the source makes a really interesting distinction about who this villain actually is.
Right. This is a crucial translation point. It changes how you read the whole book. Most English Bibles will say Satan.
Yeah.
And we immediately picture the red guy, horns, pitchfork.
The ultimate enemy of God.
Exactly. But the original Hebrew here is Ha-Satan.
Which means?
The accuser.
The accuser. That feels a lot more bureaucratic.
It is. In the context of the ancient war, think ancient Assyria or Persia kings had these secret agents. Their job was to travel the empire, collect dirt on people, and test their loyalty. They were prosecutors, accusing spirits within the royal court.
So this figure in Job might not be the devil of the New Testament, this independent agent of pure evil, but rather a functionary in the divine council, like a celestial district attorney.
Precisely. He's part of the council, he's doing a job, and he looks at Job and he says to God, look, of course this guy loves you. You've put a hedge of protection around him. He loves you for the perks.
It's the transactional theory of religion. I put coins in the vending machine, God gives me a Pepsi.
Right. The accuser's claim is if you take away the wealth, the camels, the comfort, if that vending machine eats his dollar, Job will curse you to your face. It's a bet.
And God takes the bet. Which, let's just be honest, that feels uncomfortable. God is using a human life as a poker chip.
It is uncomfortable, and the text does not shy away from that discomfort. God removes the protection, and, well, things go south immediately.
In minutes, raiders steal the oxen and camels, fire from heaven, which is so ironic considering Job's piety burns up all the sheep, and then a great wind knocks a house down on all 10 of his children.
Just complete devastation. He goes from the top of the social pyramid to having nothing.
And Job's reaction is, it's almost supernatural. He says, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. He worships.
So he passes the first test. He proves his faith isn't just about the perks. But the accuser isn't satisfied. He doubles down. He says, okay, he lost his stuff, but a man will give anything for his skin, touch his health, make him hurt physically, and then he'll break.
And God allows it. The description here is visceral. We aren't talking about a bad flu.
No, these are painful boils covering his entire body, from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head.
And this is where the visual gets really dark. The source describes where Job ends up. He's not in his mansion anymore. He's sitting on the ash heap.
And we need to clarify what an ash heap is in the ancient world. This isn't just a cozy fireplace. This is outside the city walls. It's the town dump.
The dump.
It's where they burned the dung of thousands of animals.
So he's sitting in a pile of burnt waste.
Yes. He's an outcast. He's unclean. He's in agony. And the text says he's taking a broken piece of pottery, a shard from the trash, and scraping his skin to try to get some relief.
That is rock bottom. Scraping your infected skin with garbage while sitting in garbage.
Yeah.
And then his wife shows up.
Yeah.
She gets a lot of hate for her line here.
Curse God and die.
Yeah. She's usually painted as this villainous, nagging wife. But if you think about it, she also just lost 10 kids. She lost her home. And now she's watching her husband rot alive.
That's a fair point. Our source suggests this might not be malice. It could be mercy. She just wants the misery to end. She knows suicide isn't an option for a pious man, so she suggests the only way out. Force God's hand, curse him, get struck by lightning, let it be over.
But Job doesn't do it. He does, however, fall into a deep depression. He curses the day he was born. And this is where the source brought up something I had never heard before. In his lament, Job mentions something specific. He wishes that those who are ready to arouse Leviathan had destroyed him in the womb.
Leviathan, the sea monster.
Right. And for a long time, people just thought this was, poetic imagery, like saying, I wish the boogeyman got me. But your notes mention some archaeology that suggests this was a very literal fear.
It was. Archaeologists found these incantation bowls at a place called Nippur. They were used by Israelites held captive in Babylon, and they had these magic spells written on them. One of them literally says, I enchant you with the spell of Leviathan, the sea dragon.
So when Job says Leviathan, he's referencing a very real, very terrifying cultural concept.
Exactly. Leviathan represents the ultimate chaos, the uncontrollable force of nature and death. Job is saying, I wish the chaos monster had eaten me before I ever saw the light of day.
He's staring into the abyss. But he's not allowed to just sit there and be sad. His friends show up, the tribunal.
The three friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar.
The source points out they did one smart thing.
Just one.
They sat in silence for 7 days.
It's the ancient practice of sitting Shiva, just being present in the grief. Honestly, they should have just kept sitting.
Right, because as soon as they open their mouths, it's a total disaster.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and the source emphasizes this. They aren't trying to be mean. They represent the best logic of the ancient world.
They're the intellectuals. They represent the retribution principle. It's a simple equation, almost like physics to them. God is just, therefore, suffering happens to evil people. If you're suffering a lot, you must have sinned a lot.
It's the karma of the ancient Near East. What goes around comes around.
Precisely. So Eliphaz goes first. He's the elder statesman. He uses this metaphor of lions. He says strong lions eventually starve if they're wicked. The implication is, Job, you thought you were a lion, but you're wicked, so God is breaking your teeth.
Ouch. And then Bildad. He seems more like the traditionalist.
Bildad appeals to history. He uses nature metaphors. 2 reeds near the Nile. Reeds need water to survive. If they dry up, they've been cut off from the source. He's calling Job a hypocrite, a phony.
So Eliphaz says you sinned, Bildad says you're fake, and then there's Zophar. The source calls him the harshest of the 3.
Oh, Zophar is the dogmatist. He doesn't mince words at all. He calls Job greedy. He says Job swallowed riches like a glutton, and now God is forcing him to vomit them up. He basically says, Job, you're lucky God isn't punishing you more.
That is graphic.
Yeah.
Imagine your best friend saying that while you're scraping boils off your skin. Hey man, stop complaining, you deserve worse.
It's brutal, but from their perspective, they have to believe this. Because if Job is innocent and suffering, well, then the whole system is broken. And if the system is broken, then they aren't safe either.
That's a great point. They're defending their own worldview. But Job knows he's innocent. That's the tension. He hasn't done anything to deserve this level of ruin, so he starts to question the system.
He does. He pushes back hard. He says, look around. Evil people thrive all the time. Thieves live in mansions. He accuses God of blindfolding the judges of the earth. He basically demands a trial. He says, let the Almighty answer me.
He wants his day in court. He wants to subpoena God. And just when you think God is going to show up, we get this 4th guy.
Elihu.
Elihu, the young, angry interrupter.
Where does he even come from? He just appears out of nowhere in the text.
He does just appear, and he's angry at Job for justifying himself, and angry at the friends for failing to prove Job wrong. but he offers a slightly different perspective. He suggests that suffering isn't always punishment for past sin. Sometimes it's preventative.
Like a course correction.
Yes. He calls suffering chains that God uses to slow a person down, to keep them from falling into a pit, or to prepare them for something in the future. It's the idea of suffering as discipline or education.
So not punishment, but preparation. That's a bit more palatable, I guess. But as Elihu is ranting, the whole atmosphere changes. The weather turns. A massive storm begins to form. Thunder, thick clouds, ice. The source describes a terrifying atmospheric shift.
And out of that storm, God finally speaks.
The whirlwind.
This is the moment Job's been waiting for. He's got his subpoena. He wants answers. He wants to know about the bet, the justice,
Yeah.
why he's suffering. And God says,
What? God says, prepare yourself like a man. I will question you and you shall answer me.
he flips the script.
Completely. And here's what is so fascinating and what the source really drives home. God never answers Job's question. He never mentions the accuser. He never explains the bet. He never says, sorry, Job, it was a test.
Instead, he gives him a physics lesson,
Cosmic geography and physics, yeah. He asks Job if he knows the measurements of the earth.
which implies precision.
Exactly. The source notes the fine-tuning argument here. If the earth were slightly closer to the sun, we'd burn. Slightly further, we'd freeze. God is asking, Job, do you have the capacity to calibrate gravity in orbit? Were you there when I laid the foundation?
It's a way of establishing scale. I am big, you are small.
And then he moves to meteorology. Who shuts in the sea with doors? Do you know where light comes from? He's just overwhelming Job with complexity. He's showing Job the difference between a human perspective, which is stuck right here in the moment, and a divine perspective, which sees the mechanics of the entire universe.
And then, and I love this part, God takes him on a virtual tour of the animal kingdom. It's like an episode of Planet Earth, but directed by the creator.
It really is. He talks about the wild donkey, the eagle, the mountain goat.
But he also mentions the ostrich. Why the ostrich? That seems so random.
It seems random to us, and that's the whole point. God describes the ostrich as a silly bird. It lays its eggs on the ground where they can be crushed. It treats its young harshly. It's almost poorly designed by human standards. But God says, I made it. I watch it. It brings me glory.
He's saying his value system is different from ours. He provides for the lion cub and the silly ostrich.
Right. It reminds me of that later teaching about the sparrow. Not one sparrow falls to the ground apart from the Father. God is telling Job, I am managing a level of complexity you cannot even conceive of. Just because you can't see the reason for your pain doesn't mean there isn't a manager at work.
So Job is getting schooled. But God isn't done. He brings out the big guns, the monster.
At climax of God's whole argument, he introduces two creatures, the behemoth and the leviathan.
Okay, let's talk behemoth first. The description is massive. Eats grass like an ox, bones like bronze bars.
And a tail like a cedar tree.
Now, I've heard people say this is a hippo.
That's the common footnote explanation. But have you ever seen a hippo's tail? It's this little flap of skin. It is definitely not a cedar tree.
So a dinosaur.
Some sources suggest a sauropod. But whether it's a dinosaur or a mythical beast, the point God is making is, I made this thing. It is the first of my works. It is undefeatable by humans, and
Mhm.
yet I can approach it.
But the behemoth is just the warm-up act for the main event. Leviathan? We're back to the sea dragon.
The creature Job was so afraid of in his depression.
The description here is terrifying. Rows of shields for scales, smoke coming out of its nostrils, fire from its mouth that makes the deep boil like a pot. This is not a crocodile, is it?
A fire-breathing crocodile? Yeah, unlikely. This connects back to what we said earlier about the Nippur bulls. The sea represented chaos, death. It was uncontrollable. Leviathan is the living embodiment of that chaos.
So when God spends a whole chapter describing this dragon, what's he telling Job? I made a scary monster.
He's saying that the world contains chaos. He's admitting it. There are monsters. There are raiders. There is cancer. There is loss. Leviathan is real. The world is not a safe, sterile machine where input A always leads to output B. It's wild.
And Job can't defeat it.
Job can't even get near it. If Job tries to fight Leviathan, he dies. But God says, I can put a hook in its nose. I can put a leash on it.
Wow, that's a huge shift in perspective. God isn't saying there is no chaos. He's saying I am the master of the chaos.
Exactly. God allows the chaos for purposes that a human who can't even understand the ostrich cannot possibly grasp. But he remains in control of it. He's not afraid of the dragon.
So the answer to why do bad things happen isn't a logical formula. It's not you sinned or it's a test. It's a relationship with the only actually backing, being powerful enough to leash the dragon.
That's the core of it, and Job gets it.
Yeah, his response is beautiful. He says, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you.
He doesn't get his reason. He never finds out about the bet. But he gets God's presence, and that is enough. He repents in dust and ashes.
And then we get the restoration. God gives him double everything.
Double the sheep, double the camels, and he has 10 more children.
Which, to be fair, doesn't replace the children he lost.
No, and that's a poignant detail. Grief isn't a race by replacement. You can't just get a new kid and forget the old one, but it shows that the trial has an end. The winter passes. However, our source brings up a final, powerful connection that we have to make to really wrap our heads around this.
The Christian connect.
Yes. Because if you look at the profile of Job, a righteous man, tested by the accuser, stripped of everything, forsaken by his friends, sitting in agony while innocent,
It sounds familiar.
it points to another man of sorrows, Jesus.
But there's a key difference.
Right. Job was a man. Jesus was God. The source argues that to truly answer the question, why do good people suffer, you have to ask a different question. Why did God suffer?
That's a mind bender. Usually we think of God as above suffering.
The God who questions Job from the whirlwind, the God who tamed Leviathan, eventually came down and entered the ash heap. He became the outcast. He let the chaos, monster, death, and sin do its absolute worst to him.
So he didn't just leash the dragon from a distance, he let the dragon bite him.
Precisely. He entered the ultimate chaos to defeat it from the inside. So the Christian answer to suffering isn't just God is mysterious or God is sovereign. It's God is with you in it. He has felt the pain of the shards and the betrayal of the friends.
That changes the texture of the suffering, doesn't it? It means you aren't alone on the ash heap.
It means the chaos has a leash, and the one holding the leash loves you enough to bleed for you.
That is a lot to process. But it's a much more robust answer than just be good and you'll get rich.
It is. It's an answer that can actually hold weight when the storm comes. It's not an explanation, it's an anchor.
So what does this all mean for us today?
I think it challenges our demand for explanations. We want a flowchart for our pain. We want to know why we lost the job or why the diagnosis came back positive. Job shows us we might not get the flowchart. We might not get the logic, but we get the designer.
And if that designer can handle a fire-breathing sea dragon, maybe he can handle my problems.
That's the hope.
I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. We talked about Leviathan representing chaos. If God is powerful enough to tame the Leviathan, is it possible, just possible, that the chaos in your life right now is serving a function you are simply too small to understand yet?
That's a brave question to ask.
It is. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
See you next time.
Thinking Deeper by 6-7. Signing off.
Yeah.
Take care of yourselves. You matter.